A typical day for me is pretty varied. At this point in my career, I would say that I spend about 10% of my time in clinical care. I see patients in a memory center that treats persons with Alzheimer's disease and related disorders of cognition. I spend maybe 40% of my time running a laboratory and a center that does that both of which do non-invasive brain stimulation. So my area of research is magnetic and electrical brain stimulation in order to rehabilitate deficits of cognition in patients with neurological diseases that affect cognition. My main area of research focus within that is aphasia. So we spend a lot of time sticking magnets and electrodes on people's brains, trying to figure out if we can improve speech. And then an increasing portion of my time is spent doing administrative work, either in the medical school or increasingly in the university itself, the University of Pennsylvania, where I'm currently the chair-elect of the university's faculty senate. So I and a couple other people represent all the faculty to the president, the provost, and the administration, and try to guide the entire institution in that way. So that's a lot of different ways that my week could go, and so which is great. It's great to have that level of variety, and so there's never any room to get bored. I'm going to divide that question up into two questions, right? Because you can think of it as what inspired you to go into neurology and what inspired you to go into academia, right? And so I think for the first question, I have been interested in minds and brains since I was a child. I mean, I think I was first interested in mental phenomena, just the idea that, we have this organ, and because we have this organ, it drives us to perceive things and have thoughts and be conscious and create art and music and literature and all the things that we do. I mean, I just think it's astounding. I mean, I to this day, I can't sort of fully wrap my mind around it. And I guess always being amazed by that first drove me to think that I was going to be a psychologist of some type, then eventually drove me to think I was going to be a cognitive neuroscientist, a sort of PhD cognitive neuroscience researcher. But then when I decided that I wanted to apply that to human beings as in the clinical context, made me decide that I wanted to go to medical school, at which point it sort of became clear to me almost right away that I wanted to be a behavioral neurologist. And so that path sort of seems like a garden path for me based on what I was interested in from the time that I was, I don't know, a teenager. Okay, so then your second question is, well, then why academia? Why academic neurology? And there I would say that there are two things that I find really rewarding about it. And, I'm sure these themes are going to come up over and over again. The first is the idea of investigation. The idea that when I talk about brains and I'm interested in brains, I'm not just interested in understanding the received wisdom of what other people have discovered about brains. I would like to be part of that overarching endeavor, right? I would also like to be one of those people who says, well, what if brains work this way? And then test that out and feel the reward or disappointment, depending on whether or not my ideas are borne out or not, and retool the ideas if it turns out they're not borne out. The second thing is that I think I enjoy the kind of yeoman process of, and by that I mean the kind of multi-generational process of academic learning, where there are mentors who help develop the careers of more junior individuals who then themselves grow into positions where they can help others in this sort of complicated, many-person endeavor that we call science and that we call academic medicine, right? And I think that there's a lot of pride to be had in being part of that, but also it's very fulfilling. It's fulfilling to both to have been the recipient of that kind of mentorship, right? That kind of intellectual largesse on the part of others, and also to be able to give my time and effort to those in subsequent generations of neurologists and academics. My career has evolved over time, I would say, in a number of ways. I think probably the easiest way to describe this is along two basic tracks. I think clinically, things have evolved actually three tracks. So first, clinically, things have evolved probably the least, in terms of how I spend time, the kinds of patients who I see. Although I'm actually soon making a pivot where I'm developing a specialty clinic based around seeing persons with aphasia specifically, because one of the things that I've come to the conclusion of is that that persons with aphasia are often not receiving optimal care. So I want to sort of focus on that since it's the principal area of my research as well. But other than that, the sort of basic process and how much time I've devoted to my clinical care has stayed pretty fixed since I became a faculty member. Other things in my career have changed pretty dramatically. So the first thing is the research. First of all, I was hired on the physician scientist track, and so research had comprised the lion's share of my week, from the time that I was appointed as a faculty member. And as I've taken on more administrative roles, that's sort of contracted a little bit. And so that means that I am at a little bit more arm's length from some of the processes of the research itself, right? There are people in my lab, there are teams, there are sub-teams of people accomplishing things, and in some ways I become more like a CEO of the lab than a person sort of wading in the weeds, right? And so that it changes the flavor. I also started a center for non-invasive brain stimulation. So my lab is myself and a few other faculty members who are interested in our particular intellectual interests, which are brain stimulation for aphasia and other problems in cognitive neurology and cognitive neuroscience. My center focuses on bringing together faculty across a variety of specialties, so neurology, neurosurgery, psychiatry, some people in PM&R, those who are focused on neurorehabilitation, in order to focus on developing and using neuromodulation, whether it's invasive brain stimulation like DBS or non-invasive brain stimulation like the kinds that we use, magnetic and electrical stimulation, or novel technologies, emerging technologies like focused ultrasound, really sort of bringing those to the fore as scientific tools and tools that can be translated to a variety of different patient populations. So that's sort of at a different level, right? So that's a different scale than I was at when I was, say, for example, a newly appointed junior faculty member. And then the third area where I think the career has really evolved has been in the nature and scope of my administrative roles. So when I came to Penn, I started out being interested in outreach and engagement efforts. So I started by directing a program that brought neuroscience education into West Philadelphia high schools, and then sort of brought students from West Philadelphia high schools into the medical school to have a medical school-like experience, because many of them had never set foot on a college campus, let alone a medical school campus. And then from there, made something of a jump to being an administrator and an assistant dean in the medical school, so undergraduate medical education, focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, then eventually became the vice chair for that same range of topics in the Department of Neurology, and then was for a time the vice dean for inclusion, diversity, and equity for the entire School of Medicine. So all the departments, really largely focused on faculty and other people at that level, hirings, those kinds of activities. And then, as I've already said, more recently, I've taken on a role for the whole institution, for the whole university, where in this case, I'm representing the faculty writ large to the administration, to the president, to the provost, and to the administration, trying to really embody and reinforce the values that the faculty think are important to the institution, which it turns out covers a lot of the ground that I had been covering in some of my prior roles, as well as a number of other values that are of importance. And so, in some ways, it has again grown in size and scope, and also adjusted, both to the changes in my own career, but also changes in the environment, the demands on institutions. There are a few things I find really rewarding about having a career in academic neurology. The first, and I'm going to apply, I'm going to gear this towards the specific features of my career, obviously. I mean, there are many roads to careers in academic neurology, and they're going to have different reward sets. So I'm going to speak to mine, where a big component has been the research component, as well as circulating in these environments where I work with a lot of colleagues, and I'm often either mentored by or mentoring colleagues. So the first thing I'll say is, and I've already alluded to it, is the idea of mentorship and how rewarding a process that is to me. I am my kids like to remind me frequently that I'm getting up there, or at least that I am solidly middle-aged. And so one benefit of that is that I have now been in this field long enough to actually have mentees who have themselves achieved success and themselves have mentees, right? I'm like a mentor grandfather now, right? And that's such a rewarding feeling that that a student who I had in my lab when she was an undergrad, and then when she was in medical school, who then came back and did a fellowship with us, is now like a faculty member in her own right, or that a student that I had as an undergrad more recently is now an MD PhD off at a different program, like finishing off his residency. Like these stories, it extends one's career in a way that you didn't really imagine. You didn't imagine that you would have this kind of sort of out-of-body existence, like in all these places with all these people whose lives you've touched, and vice versa, right? In a way that's really rewarding. A second thing, again, geared towards the specifics of my career path. I love making hypotheses. I love asking questions about, what if brains work this way? I think I sort of brought that up before, right? And then figuring out an experiment that tries to address that question, and then for that to actually be borne out, for that to be true. Like, I find that really rewarding. Like, if you've got the idea of having good brain sense and just being like, I think brains work like this, and for it to be the case that the most complicated thing in the known universe actually does something the way you predicted it would, right, is it's amazing. And I feel really lucky to be able to be in a position where I ask those questions and sometimes get coherent answers. The third thing, and I'll highlight four things. The third thing is the variety of the job, right? I mean, one thing, good times, bad times, the one thing I can never say is that this job is boring. Like, there's always something different to do this year than there was last year, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that in even what seem like some of the most chaotic times. And the fourth thing I want to emphasize is that being in academic neurology allows you, and I think this probably applies to practically anyone who's in academic neurology. I don't know, I will go out on a limb and say most people who are in academic neurology. Being in academic neurology allows you to spend your life surrounded by absolutely outstanding, brilliant people. And, I think that is something to be truly grateful for. My dad, who actually he didn't go to college, he didn't go to medical school, he wasn't a physician. So, but he had a lot of folksy wisdom, and he used to say this thing, which is, you can't fly with the eagles if you're running with the turkeys. All right, and what it basically meant was, like, if you want to excel, surround yourself with excellent people. And I just think it's a remarkable opportunity to be able to surround yourself every day with the kind of excellent colleagues who I've been fortunate enough to spend my time with. And I bet that's true of a lot of people who are in academic neurology. I would give someone considering a career in academic neurology 2.5 pieces of advice. The half piece of advice, which is not very useful, is do it, definitely go for it. And that's not a piece of advice. That's just unbridled enthusiasm. So let's discount that and go with 2 pieces of actual advice. So the first, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I think this might be the 3rd time I'm mentioning mentorship. So 3rd time's the charm. So mentorship, first, get some, and then give some, right? So I think that probably one of the most important keys to success on the road to academia, because there are a lot of hurdles to jump, there are a lot of sort of landmines along the way, and it's really a challenge if you plan to go it alone without really good, solid, and longitudinal advice, right? So finding the right mentors is very important. And I want to emphasize mentors, right? Because one generally does not model one's entire career or perhaps one's entire life after another person, right? No. So it's very likely that one person won't have all the answers to how you should be shaping things, in your work experience, in your lived experience outside of work, right? And so get yourself a team, right? And then become a member of teams that are providing the same sage advice to other people, recognizing how valuable it was to you. So that's my first real piece of advice. The second piece is that I think that you have to stay resilient and flexible. All right, it isn't always the case. Certainly, if you're going into research and you're writing grants and manuscripts all the time, you will quickly find out that success isn't always immediately forthcoming, right? And so you have to stay resilient. You have to stay resilient to things that seem like they might be rejection at the and sometimes they literally are rejection. But things that might be at first blush stymieing to you, right? You have to stay resilient. And then the second piece is that you have to stay flexible. You have to stay flexible because circumstances change, all sorts of things beyond your control change, and you have to find ways to meet the moment. And frankly, even if the sort of structure and format of what you do, let's say you stay in scientific endeavors, I mean, the science is going to change, right? I mean, the things that we thought about how brains worked when I started out are most of those things are not right now, or at least we don't think so. And many of the things that I'm thinking are right now are not going to be deemed correct by the time I'm ready to hang my head up, right? And so even if you stay along the same path, you just have to stay mentally flexible and ready to adapt to change in all arenas. So those I think would be my 2 real pieces of advice.